الرحيم نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم. We begin with Allah's blessed name. We praise Him and we glorify Him as He ought to be praised and glorified. And we pray for peace and for blessings on all His noble messengers, and in particular on the last of them all, the Blessed Prophet Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. As we greet you on this, the end of the 29th day of the month of Dhul. We looked in the sky but we could not see the moon. Anyone saw the moon? Nobody saw the moon. So if the moon is not seen, it means that the month of Dhul will continue for one more day here in Durres in Albania. And we greet you with Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me first explain that we had to dim the lights in order to keep the room cool, because the temperature outside, it feels like 35 degrees at this time, and the consumption of electricity at this time is so great that the air conditioning system cannot keep the place sufficiently cool. So never mind if the lighting is a little dim. More important than seeing my face is to listen to the lecture. We've been here in the city of Durres in Albania since Wednesday night. We had sessions on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And yesterday we went to visit the beautiful town of Skodra by the big lake. And it was a long, long day. And we were tired. So there was no lecture yesterday. And today, tomorrow, and Wednesday we have the last 3 lectures, 3 classes. And then on Thursday we say goodbye and we travel to London, inshallah. Our topic today is one I have been speaking on for a long time, but I want to address specifically the question, who is Dhul Qurnain? Because no matter how many times I lecture on this subject, it seems as though the lecture goes through one ear and it comes out through the other ear. So let's go directly straight to the face of who is Dhul Qurnain. So after this, if my critics keep on asking, who is Dhul Qurnain? We say, now that's not my problem, that's your problem. Because we have explained the subject with clarity. Alhamdulillah. And so, who is Dhul Qurnain? We go to Surah Al-Kahf of the Quran, and Allah asks the question. He repeats a question, and he says, بَعْدَ أَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ مِنَ الشَّيْطَانِ الرَّجِيمِ وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ, and they question you about Dhul Qurnain. Who is questioning? The answer, of course, as is well known to everybody listening to me, is that the Quraysh sent a delegation to the rabbis, the Jewish rabbis in the city of Medina. At that time it was called Yathrib, to ask the rabbis, how can we tell whether Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam is indeed a prophet of the one God, like unto Abraham and Moses alayhi salam? And the rabbis had responded and we want the whole world to be reminded. We don't want it to be forgotten. The rabbis had responded, and they said, ask him these 3 questions which only a prophet can answer. Rabbi, do you remember? That's what you ask. And in response to these 3 questions, I will mention only one, because I mentioned the 3 questions several times. They ask him about the great traveler who traveled to the 2 ends of the land. That's the question. And in response to that question, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down in the Quran, He sent down the answer in Surah Al-Kahf. وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنْ ذِي الْقَرْنَيْنِ, and they question thee about Dhul Qurnain. We ask the question at the beginning, is this an ayah muhkama or is it an ayah mutashabihah? When they ask about Dhul Qurnain, it is the Quran which must explain. We don't need any interpretation. Let the Quran explain. The word qarn means horn. And therefore Dhul Qurnain is someone who possesses 2 horns. This is an ayah muhkama. So if you want to identify anyone in history as Dhul Qurnain, you must ensure that he has 2 horns. If you say that the word horn here is to be interpreted, the implication is that this would then be an ayah mutashabihah. If you say the 2 horns mean so and so and so and so, you're interpreting the word horn, because you cannot provide the 2 horns on top of his head. Alexander the Great from Macedonia, Alexander the Great had no horns on his head. I don't think anybody accepts that. Cyrus, the Persian emperor, he didn't have any horns on his head. So if you are interpreting the word horn, the implication is you made it an ayah mutashabihah. But the Quran has never used the word qarn to mean horn. If I am wrong, kindly correct me. The Quran has used the word qarn many times, but never to mean horn. Any time that Allah uses the word qarn in the Quran, He always speaks about a generation, an epoch, a people, and never a horn. So we on this side, we say this is the meaning. Dhul Qurnain is someone who impacts on 2 generations. Someone who impacts twice in history on 2 different peoples. If we are wrong, then tell us what is right. This is our explanation. This is not ta'wil. This is tafsir. This is explaining the Quran. And so we recognize this as an ayah muhkama. You might choose to have it as an ayah mutashabihah, but our response is that an ayah muhkama has a much higher status than an ayah mutashabihah. And so we are comfortable that we are safely on safe ground, that Dhul Qurnain is not someone with 2 horns to be interpreted to mean this or that or the other, Zulkarnain is someone who impacts on 2 generations, twice in history. And the Quran goes on to describe Zulkarnain as someone on whom Allah has bestowed power and that he has faith. I have to shorten now because I've taught this subject 100,000 times already, but my critics seem not to be able to understand. When power rests on the foundations of faith, how is power used? That is what Surah Al-Kahf proceeds to explain. When power rests on the foundations of faith, how is power used? Remember, we're talking about 2 currents twice in history. So be careful to examine carefully the first current. The first current, or the first time, impacting upon the first people, the first generation. When did it occur? When did it occur? Zulkarnain built a barrier, built with blocks of iron. And we are told in a hadith that our Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam, he had a vision and he woke from his sleep. It was such a terrible vision that he woke from his sleep with his face flushed red. What did he see that was so terrible? And he uttered these famous words, these ominous words, Wailul lil Arab min sharrin qad iktaraba. Woe unto the Arabs because of an evil which is now approaching. It is close. And then he went on to raise his hands like this and make a circle with his fingers. And he said, today a hole had been made in that radam bit by Zulkarnain. We don't know when it was built, but we do know that the collapse, the destruction of that barrier took place in the lifetime of Nabi Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam. And that is for more than 1400 years ago. So the first current took place more than 1400 years ago. We don't know how long the barrier was there. Maybe another 1,000 years before it was brought down. So we're talking about the first current which occurred probably thousands of years ago. That is the time frame. If the first current occurred thousands of years ago, has the second current occurred as yet? In order for us to answer that question, you got to put on your thinking caps. Allah sent the Quran to people who think. And if you refuse to think, Allah says, Inna sharra ad-dawwabi inda Allahi summul bukmul ladhi la yaqilun. He says, if you don't think, you are the worst of all creatures in the sight of Allah. Take that and put it in your pipe and smoke it. That's what Allah says in the Quran. If you do not think, then you are the worst people, you are dumb, you are deaf. The worst people in the sight of Allah because you refuse to think. Sorry, I have to raise my voice. What can I do in my old age? All these years I've been teaching and they would not listen. No, they would not listen. Not even with a bulldozer can you get them to think. What can we do? If this is the time frame we're talking about, let us now turn to the place. the geographical frame, not the time frame. Qurnain travels in the direction of the setting of the sun. That's the first journey. And then he travels in the direction of the rising of the sun. That's the second journey. In the Quran, the sun always rises from the east. In some other book of geography that came from Hollywood or Disneyland, the sun can rise from somewhere else. But from the Quran, the sun always rises from the east. That will never change because La tabdila li khalqillah. Allah's creation does not change. So tell NASA, we're not interested with what you have to say. And so now, so he traveled west, and then he traveled east. And then he traveled on a third journey, and between west and east, there is a mountain range. And in between that mountain range, there is a pass. And it is by that pass that he makes the third journey. And on the third journey, he encounters a people who complain about Gog and Magog. If you want to study the subject of Gog and Magog, and you have any sense in your head, you will begin with the Quran, not with the Hadith. But they don't have sense in their head, so they ignore the Quran and they go to the Hadith. But you have sense in your head. My language is harsh, I know that. I'm hitting very hard, I know that. But my time is coming soon to leave this world. And I've been teaching this subject for so long, and they wouldn't listen. So my language is harsh now. He traveled to a place which is a pass between two mountain ranges. And there he comes across the people who speak to him about Gog and Magog. And in a Hadith al-Qudsi in Sahih Muslim, Allah's messenger speaks about Gog and Magog. And he says that when they are released, because Qurnain is going to build a barrier, the first of them will pass by the Sea of Galilee, which is in the Holy Land, not in Albania, in the Holy Land. And they will be drinking the water from the Sea of Galilee. And then they'll be proceeding to Baitul Maqdis, Jerusalem. And by the time the last of them pass, they will say, there used to be water here. If you are passing by the Sea of Galilee and you are going south to Jerusalem, the implication is your journey commences from the north. So when we want to locate the geography of Qurnain, we are looking at a place north of the Holy Land. This is the commencement of our class in geography. MashaAllah, that you have the capacity to think, so you can follow this geography lesson. But my critics don't have that capacity to think. When he traveled in the direction of the setting of the sun, he came across a body of water. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it as dark and murky. Aynun hamiyah, dark and murky. In order to identify this body of water located north of the Holy Land, but located to the west. We now look to see which bodies of water are there located north of the Holy Land and to the west. And there are only two. One is the Mediterranean Sea, but this is not a sea which is dark and murky. Visibility is several meters deep. But north of the Mediterranean Sea, there is a sea called the Black Sea. Why is it called the Black Sea? Precisely because it is Hamia. It is dark and murky. And so our geography lesson concludes. The Dhul Qurnain has traveled westwards in the direction of the setting of the sun until he came to the Black Sea. And if you know geography, you know that Crimea is in the Black Sea. The peninsula of Crimea is in the Black Sea. If you command Crimea, you command the Black Sea. Here he came across a people, and Allah spoke to Dhul Qurnain. If Allah spoke to Alexander, who worshipped Greek gods and goddesses, that would be strange, wouldn't it? We have no evidence of that. If Allah spoke to Cyrus, who worshipped the Iranian gods and goddesses, that would be strange. We have no evidence of that. So before you put your foot in fire and declare that Dhul Qurnain was Alexander or that Dhul Qurnain was Cyrus, prepare yourself to think first. Otherwise, you have to answer for your schoolboy thinking one day. Allah spoke to Dhul Qurnain and asked him, you have power. Your power rests on the foundations of faith. How are you going to use power in this region of the Black Sea? And Dhul Qurnain replied, and he says, those who are wicked in conduct, commit dhulm, I will punish them. And when they return to you, you will also punish them. So there will be an essential harmony between the world order here and the world above, when power rests on the foundations of faith. And then he went on to say that those who have faith and are righteous in conduct, I will treat them nicely and reward them. And then he traveled in the direction of the rising of the sun. And since he started from the Black Sea and he's going eastward, he has to stop when he reached the Caspian Sea. This is elementary geography. And there in the region of the Caspian Sea, he came across a people. And the language of the Quran is so little. The words are so few. It is so difficult to understand. لَنَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ مِنْ دُونِهَا سِتْرًا. And other than what we had provided for them, they had nothing else to cover them, to protect them. لَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ مِنْ دُونِهَا سِتْرًا. Could this be a primitive people? A people living the primitive way of life? Or is this a people who will constantly be vulnerable? A people who will always, always, always suffer. because they have nothing to protect them other than what Allah has provided. Is there people living in that region of the world who for thousands of years have been suffering? No one to support them, no one to protect them. Which one of these could be the meaning of وَلَمْ نَجْعَلْ لَهُمْ مِنْ دُونِهَا سِتْرًا? Allah knows best. And we proceed. When power rests on the foundations of faith, then power respects the way of life of a primitive people. This is all I can offer. I don't know more that I could say on this subject, because the language in the Quran is so few are the words. كذلك, Allah says, I understood why he acted in this way. There seems to be more hidden inside here than I am capable of reaching. And then Qurnain travels in the third direction at the pass between the mountains. And here we now have more geographical evidence. Number one, he comes across a people, لا يكادون يفقهون قولا, a people who spoke a language unconnected with all regional languages. A unique language. The Albanian language is connected with other languages around here. Who is Albanian here?
Yes.
Yes. The Albanian language is connected with other languages.
Actually not, yeah.
Huh?
Actually not.
Albanian has own branch in Indo-European.
Albanian language is
It's
unique.
isolated, unique, yes.
It's
Like
unique?
Armenian.
Not connected with other
No.
languages? Huh?
No,
Not
no.
Slavic, not Hellenic, nor
All right.
European Latin.
Very
Well,
weak.
this language spoken by these people is a language that is not connected with regional languages because we could not understand it. But eventually they're able to communicate. And then the people spoke and said that Gog and Magog are committing fasad in our land. Who are Gog and Magog? For a definition of Gog and Magog, we have to go to Nabi Muhammad ﷺ, who conveyed to us a hadith al-Qudsi, which is located in Sahih Muslim. I have created creatures of mine so powerful that none but I can destroy them. Gog and Magog, therefore, have been bestowed by Allah with power. And that power is so great that none can destroy them except Allah. But they use that power differently from Zulqarnain. Zulqarnain uses his power to punish those who are wicked. And Gog and Magog do the opposite. They use their power to commit fasad. They are in the penal code. Penal code means the code which prescribes punishment. Penal code of the Quran. There is a law that if you commit zina, you are flogged. This is in the Quran. That if you steal not a mango, you steal, for example, a dinar, we cut off your hand. If we apply that law today, there won't be any bankers in Manhattan with hands, eh? Huh? There won't be any bankers in Manhattan with hands if we apply that law. Hmm? Yeah. And the law in the Quran for fasad, the punishment for fasad, is the greatest of all. Cut off their hands and feet in opposite directions and crucify them. And the definition of crucifixion is you must die. If you crucify a man, you take his body down, and when you take his body down, he picks up his briefcase and he walks away. Is that crucifixion? I'm talking to you, not to my critics who have no sense in their head. That is not crucifixion. You crucify him, you take his body down, he picks up his briefcase and he walks away. No, come back, put you back up. You're not as yet crucified. Crucifixion is not to be put on the cross. That is not crucifixion. Go back to school. Crucifixion is to die. That is crucifixion on the cross. And the punishment for fasad is the greatest of all in the Quran. It is graded. There is banishment also from the land. But the highest punishment is cut off the hands and feet on opposite sides and crucify them. And Ibn Kathir says crucifixion means to die. That is crucifixion. So Gog and Magog commit fasad. So they use power the opposite way from Zulkarnain. And they ask Zulkarnain, can you help us? We're prepared to pay you. Can you build a barrier to protect us from them? Allah has created three kinds of beings who are capable, who are sentient beings. He has created angels. He's created jinn. And he's created human beings. And some might also add, where he also created George Bush. He created angels, he created the jinn, and he created human beings. Angels cannot commit fasad. No. Because وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. Angels do only that which Allah asks them to do. وَيَفْعَلُونَ مَا يُؤْمَرُونَ. So Gog and Magog cannot be angels. Well then, can they be jinn? Yes, jinn can commit fasad. Because you have jinn who are believers and you have jinn who are shayateen, commit evil deeds. So if you build a barrier with blocks of iron, can you stop the jinn from passing? No, the jinn can pass through the iron. Huh? You can understand that because you have the capacity to think. So Gog and Magog cannot be jinn. When Zulkarnain built the barrier with blocks of iron, he then asked, he said, bring me blocks of iron, Zubarul Hadid, and help me with your manpower. So you must expect that that is a region of the world, geographical region with lots of iron ore. Do you have lots of iron ore in Albania?
No.
I'm waiting for an answer. No. But in that region in Georgia, where the Black Sea is to the west, the Caspian Sea is to the east, and in between are located the Caucasus Mountains. And there is a pass between the mountains called the Dariel Gorge. In that region there is an abundance of iron ore. To this day, we are on solid geographical foundations. Yes. Lots of iron ore in that region. So he built the barrier with blocks of iron, and then he said, blow with your bellows, build a furnace, and take molten copper and pour it on the barrier to prevent rust. And then he says, هذا رحمة من ربي. The Gog and Magog cannot pass through, cannot penetrate the barrier, nor can they scale it. What is the ayah in Arabic? Asbullah?
فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه وما استطاعوا له نقبا
فما استطاعوا أن
فما استطاعوا أن يظهروه فما استطاعوا له نقبا
Naqba. Yeah, I've forgotten the ayah. They could neither penetrate nor could they scale. But jinn could pass through. So we eliminate the angels and we eliminate the jinn. Now we only left with human beings. So Gog and Magog have to be human beings. This is for you who have the capacity to think. The rest, the caravan is moving and leaving them behind. He says, هذا رحمة من ربي. This barrier which I have built is actually rahmah from Allah, an act of kindness. فَإِذَا جَاءَ وَعْدُ رَبِّي. But when that time comes of which my Rabb has warned, جَعَلَهُ دَكَّا. Allah will bring down this barrier. وَكَانَ وَعْدُ رَبِّ حَقًّا. And then the warning of my Lord will come to pass. This is card number 1 from the Quran. We are attempting to answer the question, who is Zulqarnain? And this is what Zulqarnain did in the first of the 2 Qarns. Because we dismiss a man with horns on his head, and we dismiss an ayah mutashabiha, in which you are interpreting the horns in some different way. Because we have an ayah muhkama, which has a higher status from an ayah mutashabiha. If this is card number 1, when will be card number 2? For this we turn now, we leave Surah Al-Kahf and we go to Surah Al-Anbiya, which tells us something more about Gog and Magog. Allah speaks of a town, Qarya, and that He destroyed the town, and that He expelled the people of the town. And having expelled them, He placed a ban on them, that they could never return to reclaim that town as their own. Until when? Until Gog and Magog are released, meaning the barrier is brought down, demolished, and Gog and Magog spread out all over the world in all directions. And when they spread out all over the world, since they have an indestructible power, not even Tipu Sultan can stand up to them. Not even Saddam Hussein can stand up to them. When Gog and Magog are released, and they spread out all over the world, then an event will occur only once in history. Let me repeat that. When Gog and Magog are released and they spread out all over the world with their indestructible power, they'll take control of the world. They'll take control of power over the world. An event will occur only once in history. Let me repeat it one more time. When Gog and Magog are released, وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ, and they spread out all over the world. And when their indestructible power, they will take control of power in the world and establish the world order of Gog and Magog. And this is an event which will occur only once in history. When that happens, then these people who had been expelled from that city will be brought back to the city. Not brought back in a manner which is righteous and just, but brought back by a people who used power to act with wickedness, fasad, used power to oppress. These people will bring Gog and Magog back to that city. And then we ask the question, which city is this? And for people who can think, the answer is so simple. Our prophet said that Gog and Magog will be destroyed by Allah in Jerusalem. He said that Gog and Magog will pass by the Sea of Galilee on their way to Jerusalem. No other city had been mentioned in connection with Gog and Magog other than Jerusalem. And when we look at Jerusalem, we see, yes, it was destroyed. Holy Israel was destroyed. And the Jews were expelled. And for 2,000 years they could not return to reclaim Jerusalem as their own. For us who think, we know this. And today, Jerusalem, today the Jews have returned to reclaim Jerusalem as their own. Today, the Jews have returned to Jerusalem to reclaim it as their own, 2,000 years after Allah had expelled them. Who brought them back? Who are those who came on the stage of the world and then used their indestructible power, spreading out all over the world? China, South America, all over the world they went, conquering, colonizing, taking control of power in the world, and then using that power to bring the Jews back to the Holy Land. For us who can think it is so easy, this occurred only once in history. It would not happen again. The answer is, it is so simple. The modern Western civilization, which was led first of all by Britain, and then led by the United States of America. It is this civilization which was given that indestructible power. It is this civilization which spread out all over the world. At the beginning of the First World War, in 1914, a little island off the coast of Europe, so small that Napoleon contemptuously dismissed Britain as a nation of shopkeepers. Yet Britain, at the eve of the First World War, controlled every single important naval port all over the world. And it was Britain who led the way. It was Britain who led the way for the Jews to return to Jerusalem. It was Britain who gave the Balfour Declaration that it was the intention of the British government to work for the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. The Balfour Declaration of 1917. And so we have come to the conclusion that Gog and Magog are those who control power in modern Western civilization. But we can repeat this 100,000 times. Our critics will never accept it. The scholars of Islam of this modern age will not accept it. They will not accept anything from Imran Hosein. They despise this name, but Allah knows best. This is the truth. Gog and Magog are those who control power in modern Western civilization. So who is Qurnain? Remember, Gog and Magog are going to spread out all over the world only once. Only once. Remember that Gog and Magog are going to start their journey from the Caucasus Mountains, coming south, coming to the Holy Land. Remember that there is a second Qarn in Qurnain. So when will that Qarn come? Before we turn to the second Qarn, let us go to a hadith. I should have quoted the Arabic from the verse in Surah Al-Anbiya with the town. وَحَرَامٌ عَلَى قَرْيَةٍ أَهْلَكْنَاهَا أَنَّهُمْ لَا يَرْجِعُونَ حَتَّى إِذَا فُتِحَتْ يَأْجُوجُ وَمَأْجُوجُ وَهُمْ مِنْ كُلِّ حَدَبٍ يَنْسِلُونَ. These are the two verses in Surah Al-Anbiya that I've already explained. And we have identified the Qarya as Jerusalem. In a hadith in Sahih Muslim, Nabi Muhammad ﷺ has said that when the last of Gog and Magog passed by the Sea of Galilee on their way to Jerusalem, they will say there used to be water here. There was an earthquake in Turkey just before the elections. A convenient earthquake. They were hoping that this earthquake would get rid of Erdogan. But that earthquake shows the capacity to intervene in geology. You don't have to wait for the water level in the Sea of Galilee to go down slowly, leaking drop by drop. One movement of the earth could drain the whole of the Sea of Galilee in one night. In one night. And so when the last of them passed, they will say there used to be water here. So the Sea of Galilee is destined to run dry. And I am suggesting it could be partly because of a movement of the earth, not just the evaporation of water. And they are moving from the Sea of Galilee to Jerusalem. and they're going to Jerusalem because they want to attack the Messiah. And the hadith says, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ. Allah will send Gog and Magog at that time. And all the scholars of Islam, illa masha'Allah, have all concluded from the hadith that since Allah says, فَبَعَثَ اللَّهُ يَأْجُوجَ وَمَأْجُوجَ, that Allah will send Gog and Magog, they say, Allah will send Gog and Magog only at that time when the Messiah returns, Nabi Isa alayhi salam. And therefore, Gog and Magog have not as yet been released. Gog and Magog will be released only at that time when the Messiah returns, according to that view. But that is wrong. Firstly, the Quran speaks of the release of Gog and Magog. The Quran uses the term futihat. And the hadith only says send, it says ba'atha. So you cannot use that hadith to declare that Gog and Magog would be released at that time. That is schoolboy scholarship. The other implication of using the hadith that way, and tell them you can't run away, we won't allow you to run away. Stand up like a man. If Gog and Magog have not as yet been released, and they will be released only at that time when the Messiah returns, Nabi Isa alayhi salam returns. The implication, you cannot run away from it, is that the barrier is still standing. A barrier made of blocks of iron in the Gariel Gorge between the Caucasus Mountains is still standing. The problem is there's no barrier there. There's no barrier for the last 1400 years. No one has ever seen it. For 1400 years, no one has ever seen it. And today there's something called Google Earth. Google Earth. Has it reached Albania?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes.
You don't need to travel to Georgia to search. You can stay home and use something called Google Earth, and they show you the satellite images. We don't need to pursue this subject any further to argue the barrier was destroyed more than 1,000 years ago. These fellows are living in dreamland. We have more to say on this subject. So when Gog and Magog are released, since they are people who commit fasad, inna Ya'juj wa Ma'juj mufsiduna fil ard. They commit fasad, they corrupt everything, and they corrupt in such a way that they can destroy. The implication is that when Gog and Magog are released, they will corrupt the political system. So all around the world, the worst people will now become leaders. They will corrupt the economy and corrupt the monetary system to such a way, in such a way, that the world will be inundated with economic refugees. Thousands and thousands, and every day the number is increasing. People fleeing from poverty and destitution and slavery to come to Greece, to come to Italy, to make their way to Germany, to make their way to France, to make their way to Britain. And Donald Trump can build a wall to keep the people of South and Central America out, because they're leaving Central and South America to head to the United States. Economic refugees. And this is because Gog and Magog have corrupted the economy, corrupted the market, corrupted the monetary system. But our critics can't see that. There is corruption today in entertainment, there's corruption today in the educational system, there's corruption today even in our bedroom life. Today women are dressed and yet naked. Today women dress like men. You gotta be careful when you're choosing a wife. Today men are dressed like women because men are abandoning their role as men in society. Today is an age of awladu zina, because adultery and fornication is to be found everywhere. Everywhere. Today there is a corruption of even the food that we're eating. There's a corruption of the water we are drinking. Yesterday you could pass by a river and dip your hands and drink from the river. Today you can't do that anymore because every river is now polluted. No people in history ever took sewage and pumped it into rivers and into coastal waters. No people in history ever did such a thing. And today you have a sewage system, and they take the sewage and they pump it into rivers and they pump it into coastal waters, and the fish eat the sewage and we eat the fish. There is universal corruption around the world today. Even the air that we are breathing today. In so many parts of the world you have to wear a face mask to breathe properly. Huh? There is a corruption of the atmosphere to such an extent that the bees cannot navigate anymore and honey production is declining. What more do you need to understand and recognize that we are living in an age of universal fasad? What else can explain the universal fasad other than Gog and Magog? But these pathetic people who refuse to think still remain waiting. Only when Jesus returns, only then Gog and Magog will. And so Gog and Magog have nothing to do with the universal fasad in the world today. Gog and Magog have nothing to do with the Jews being brought back to the Holy Land. Tell them, you have betrayed the Quran and you'll pay a price for that on Judgment Day. I will leave this world soon. Allah knows when He'll take me away. But I'll leave this world confident that I have explained the Quran correctly. Now then, when will the second current take place? If the first current has already taken place thousands of years ago, has the second current taken place as yet? What are the footprints that we are looking for? Because we are not identifying Zulkarnain with any individual who is going to live for a few thousand years. We are not identifying Zulkarnain with any human being who is going to live for a few thousand years. We leave that for our critics. For us, Zulkarnain is someone who will impact on 2 ages. That's all. We don't identify him with any historical personality. Who is Zulkarnain? Answer: we do not identify him with any historical personality. We say he is someone who will impact on history twice, on 2 currents. That was the first. When will the second take place? And the answer: look for the footprints. Where? Look for the footprints in the geography of the Quran. Where shall we start? Answer: look for the footprints in the region of the Black Sea. Is that so difficult to understand? When we look at the Black Sea, we ask ourselves, since Gog and Magog are the ones who brought the Jews back to the Holy Land, the second current cannot have occurred before that. We have to wait until the Jews have been brought back to the Holy Land before we start looking for the second current. Do you agree with me? Okay. The Jews were brought back to the Holy Land between 1917 and 1948, and the State of Israel was established in 1948. So during this period of time, do we see power in the region of the Black Sea resting on the foundations of faith? Yes, we do see power. We do see power in the region of the Black Sea in the Soviet Union. But the Soviet Union was an atheist state, like Britain today. An atheist state. So that cannot be power resting on the foundations of faith. And now the Soviet Union has folded its tent and disappeared into the darkness of the night. But in 2014, Russia reclaimed Crimea without fighting, without firing a shot. And since 2014, no one can remove Russia from Crimea. Don't try. You can't succeed. Russia cannot be defeated in Ukraine. Not at all. The war can continue for many more years. Russia cannot be defeated. Why? Why can Russia not be defeated? You had 2 years. The Crimean War lasted for how many years?
3 years.
3 years is correct. And that is the first war of the modern age using modern technology, the Crimean War. Today the technology is so much more advanced, and 2 years have passed, and in 2 years you could not defeat Russia. How many more years you want? The reason why they cannot defeat Russia is because Russia has power that they can't match. Who gave that power to Russia? Russia today is returning to her Orthodox Christian heart. Russia is no longer the Soviet Union. Russia is today a state which, when it gives its word, it keeps its word. Turkey gave their word. the Republic of Turkey gave its word to Russia and said, we'll keep these commanders of the Azov regiment, we'll keep them in Turkey until the end of the war. Zelensky went to Turkey, and when Zelensky was flying back to Ukraine, he took the 5 men with him. Turkey was saying to Russia, we gave our word to you, but we don't have to keep our word. Turkey was saying to Russia, we gave our word to you, but we don't have to keep our word. But Russia is not like that. Russia today is like Iran. The leadership of Russia and the leadership of Iran, Vladimir Putin in Russia and Sayed what?
Ayatollah Khamenei.
Huh?
Khamenei.
Sayed Ali Khamenei, that's right, the Rahbar of Iran. These are the two most outstanding political leaders in the world today, men of great integrity. Russia is returning to her spiritual heart. And Russia has been blessed by Allah with power. That power did not come by accident. I can, after the question session, I can answer that for you. If Russia did not have the power that Russia had, the government in Venezuela would have been changed long ago. People who think would recognize the truth of what I've said. The United States have been changing governments in Central and South America for 200 years, gunboat diplomacy. Willy-nilly, anytime they want to change the government, they'll change it. For how many years now? 15 years, I believe. The government of the United States and the United States Armed Forces cannot change the Venezuelan government. Answer? Because of Russia. That's the power that Russia has. They created ISIS. That's right. The CIA and the Israeli Mossad, supported by Turkey, created ISIS, supported by Qatar, supported by Saudi Arabia. They created ISIS. You don't believe me? Wait for Judgment Day and you see the evidence supporting what I'm saying. They created ISIS. And if ISIS had succeeded, the government of Syria would have been toppled and the Christians of Syria would have been slaughtered. But ISIS was defeated and Bashar Assad is still there. Why? Because of Russia. That is the power that Russia has today. And so we are concluding that the world is now witnessing power resting on the foundations of faith in the region of the Black Sea. And that power is being used to resist the oppressor. And if you don't recognize NATO as the biggest oppressor of all in the world today, go back to school. Go back to school. Russia is resisting NATO and Russia is succeeding in resisting NATO. And so we say we are moving now in the direction of the second Qurnain curtain. And that Gog and Magog, in the same way that they were checkmated and blocked the first time, they're being checkmated and blocked the second time. This is the conclusion of my answer to the question, who is Dhul Qurnain? In the question and answer session which now follows, we can take the subject further. Thank you.